Getting to the last of the questions now, I've got a question that was actually emailed to me from Gunther. It's actually 3 paragraphs long, and I'm not going to read it all out. Basically, it involves asking a question about new restrictions and regulations coming into effect on July 31st, building property on hillsides. Concerns the ratio of the slope and the maximum area that you're allowed to build on. I'm going to pass this one over to Bill because I think he knows a lot more about it than I do. So could you tell us, do you think that this new restriction is going to be enforced? And if so, will there be a market for villas in Phuket with a maximum building size of over 90 square metres?
I think one interesting thing is the past 12 months, certainly going forward, is it's a pretty dynamic time in terms of legislation here in Thailand. You know, the Thais are getting some things right, actually, in terms of actually implementing some rules and regulations which are addressing the environment. You know, we've had environmental codes come in, certainly, in the past 6 months, which cover the coastal areas, be it Hang Na, be it Krabi, be it Pattaya, be it Phuket as well. You know, we think these are pretty significant changes. Certainly what they're doing is effectively for the environmental changes is they're controlling the building on slopes and actually the size of the buildings which you can put on the slopes in order to cut down density. So you're not seeing scarred hillsides with 300 villas sitting on the side, say within zone 6, which is between 40 to 80 meters. You know, that is quite different legislation. In some ways, there's been some loosening of certain things, but there's also been more restrictions. I mean, one thing that's interesting, as we go forward, when you look up on the hillsides of Phuket, or how are things going to change with the new legislation? In reality, what it's probably going to do is it's going to put a crimp on people from developing these large villa developments with a lot of villas within them, certainly. In terms of the size of villas, by the rules of the law, when you start to read it, you know, you're looking at a built-up area per villa of 90 square meters. As we all know, any of these ultra villas or something else, you're talking 500, 600, 800 square meters of built-up area going all the way up to thousands. And there's a number of ways that certainly, you know, one of the first initiatives we're seeing is architects now are starting to approach this in an innovative way, how they can start building. If we go down to Bali and look at the way villas are being built is, they simply divide these into individual structures in terms of that. They're building smaller buildings, they're putting things on the rooftops as well. Without a doubt, Phuket's coastline is certainly one of its jewels, but one thing we know is that it's very expensive land, and people own this land going forward is they're probably going to be developing this into something very, very high-end. So when you drive along the coast, maybe you're not going to see these villa projects with, you know, 30, 40, 50 villas, but you're going to see incredibly high-priced villas which perhaps are smaller, perhaps knocked down to individual buildings and everything else. So we're already seeing an impact, so we can always take a negative view and say, you know, the island's ruined, everything's gone. But talking to developers already, they're trying to find ways to adjust their buildings to these sites already. I think one important thing is we're going to see rezoning of Phuket coming in very quickly, you know, within the next 60 days. And that's a pretty dramatic change, certainly, and seeing initiatives where there's actually zoning of the marine areas as well, and as far as the usage of the shore areas for the entire island. You know, we've seen some pretty substantial changes up in Phang Nga, you know, from the area from Copthorne all the way to Tai Muang. But we also have a new land law coming in terms of the entire Phang Nga province. So it's always good to take the negative view and say, you know, nothing's going to change. But we are starting to see movements in terms of the Thais trying to get things right. It's not always going to be perfect, but we think it's a step in the right direction. So things are, you know, improving very, very slowly.
Thank you. We're going to pose one last question, and then we're going to have a quick break, because these guys are getting thirsty now. I can see sweat pouring off them. And then we'll open the floor up to further questions. Population census. I think this is Martin's bag. It's currently taking place, and apparently it's a compulsory exercise. All right?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, I was invited back in June or July to try and provide some form of assistance to the population census office in Phuket. Phuket was used as a practice run on getting the population census organised. But the one reason why I brought this up is that I think it's important for everybody especially everybody in this room. If we are here, the population census is quite simply a census on the population of Phuket. Who lives in Phuket? And the questions that you answer are very, very simple. How many people speak Thai? What are the languages that spoke in your home? It talks about what earnings come into the home. But the problem at the moment with Phuket, and if we're talking about Phuket going forward, there is an enormous problem in Phuket that it is totally under-policed. Totally under-policed at the moment. The amount of police in Phuket is allocated to Phuket from central government, and it's allocated on a population of 320,000 people. And I know of incidents this week where there are senior police inspectors who have been seconded from other police stations in Phuket to other areas in Phuket because they are busy dealing with certain crimes that have been going on, which means that there is a void then in that police station with people taking care of what they need to take care of. The population of Phuket, I mean, have a guess yourself. I have a problem myself with the British Embassy where we have 300 people registered. And I think there are somewhere in the region of 5,000 to 6,000 British people who are almost permanent resident in Phuket. If there was a more correct number, there would be a full consular office in Phuket, staffed by trained Thai staff who would deal with your inquiries on your passport application, any problems that you might have that you have to go to the embassy in Bangkok. That will not happen until they can get a true figure on how many people are living here. So the census, the population census, is an enormously important thing. And if they don't get it right, then the amount of public spending, I mean, there's only one government hospital here. There are many foreigners in Phuket that use the government hospital. There are many foreigners in Phuket who unfortunately are unable to pay for that hospitalisation. The current debt coming out of Wachira Hospital per year from foreigners with bad debt is getting close to 3 million baht. And that is something that really shouldn't happen. We're giving ourselves a bad name, and it's only the few that will give the others a bad name. But, you know, are we prepared? Is everybody prepared? Does everybody have health insurance, medical insurance? I know I meet, most of the people that I meet when I visit Wachira Hospital have no insurance. It's one of the reasons they're there. We then have to go back to their family. Is there any family support? Sometimes people are just left. And it's very, very sad that they are left. And so, you know, the population census, if a truer number was there, more public funding comes into Phuket. Funds the police force, funds the public hospitals, helps to fund new roads, new systems, helps to fund the whole island. And at this moment in time, the figure is absolutely out of sync with everybody else, which builds on the frustrations that we deal with every day. All right? So I think the population census, if you didn't know it was going on, it is. I'm happy to give whatever advice or direction I can, but the more people that complete the census, better things will happen to Phuket from funding coming from government.
I think I would agree absolutely. One thing you didn't mention, I don't think, is what the estimated population of Phuket is. It's around 800,000 compared with the registered population of 300-something thousand. So it is a huge difference there. The government allocates funds according to the registered population of the province. You can see, obviously, you know, if they're funding a population of 300,000 with health ministry or the police or any other service, and the real population is 800,000, there's a huge gap there. It's not surprising, I don't think, that people are rather suspicious of census because they worry that all that information is going to get passed on to the tax office, or it's going to be passed on to the police or the immigration and so on. Personally, I don't believe that. What they really need is the numbers, just the basic numbers. You can do it online. There's a website, nso.go.th, I think it is. Go on there, you can actually do your census, online. It's worth doing, it really is. It'll be a big help to Thailand. And this is not just foreigners who should be doing this, it's Thais as well. Thais don't trust the census people either. They need to get over that.
I think one thing we know sure is that Phuket has an identity crisis. Certainly go back, there's a lot of urban angst out there. I know, more often than not when I say something, I'm going to Phuket town. How nice is it to say Phuket town? It's so small, it's a great place. It's kind of like Cheers where you know the name of everybody. But in reality, Phuket's a city. It's an urban area. There's a great urban push here in Phuket. Phuket, no matter what it has, it's an island, but it's an urban island. And I think one of the best practices we see, certainly, if you look at all of Thailand, is Bangkok and Pattaya are special economic zones. We have the BMA, certainly, in Bangkok, and we have determination in Pattaya, certainly, whereby they have government officials, they have provincial authorities who are going to be elected, and they're going to be staying there. We're not going to have a transitory governor who's going to come for 1 year or 2 years. Maybe he's at the end of his career. It's a great place to come to Phuket and basically work out your time. But there's no accountability going forward for the future of the island. One thing we can see going forward, certainly, be it the environment, be it the transportation infrastructure, these long-term issues for Phuket, certainly, would be that there's great merit to having Phuket as a special economic zone, having a certain amount of self-determination going forward and accountability by the government based here in Phuket for a long-term future. I think that's probably one of the most key factors.
Thank you, Bill. Could we have a quick show of hands who has actually completed this census yet? Who has actually completed it? Not many of us. Okay, interesting. Right, we're going to take a break then, and we're very thirsty. 10 minutes or so, please buy yourself a drink. The raffle tickets will come around as well.